Federal Civil Defense Administration presents Conducting a Neighborhood Civil Defense Meeting. You know, your problem isn't easy. There's a lot of detailed work in setting up an effective and well-organized neighborhood block warden meeting. But believe me, a good meeting's worth the trouble. I'd like to show you why, and show you the same way I was shown. So, let's hustle over to a neighborhood meeting not too far away. The group you're going to see in action tonight is really hot. This group's warden service training officer is the same fellow who taught me the ropes. Watch him in action, and you'll be on your way to running a meeting in your area that'll bring solid results. While walking over, I'd like to tell you what a good neighborhood meeting can do, what results you can get. In the first place, the neighborhood meeting will help arouse interest of the people in your area in civil defense problems and specific warden service work. In other words, you interest and educate the average householders, and, yes, at the same time, instruct the various workers you've already recruited or will recruit through the meeting. Now, as to size, or the number of people to be invited, it will depend, of course, on the particular idea you want to get across. You could invite everyone in the neighborhood to your first organization meeting. And have something on the order of this. Public mass meeting with discussions. Round tables, I think they're called. A warden I know invites about 50. Maybe 35 or 40 show up. But he holds the meetings pretty often, sometimes weekly. However, he holds other meetings at other places for other people. So in the long run, he gets them all. Well, here we are.
Good evening. Won't you sign in, please, and take a copy of the agenda?
Yes, thank you. You see, always sign them in. Gives you a record. And the agenda gets the participants thinking along the exact lines planned. Now, note the setup, the displays. Artwork and exhibits like that will get a lot of interest. Get them through the eye as well as the ear. And you'll notice the literature is well placed, and there's plenty of it. The idea is to give them something to take home and read. Something. Say, George, how about giving our friend here a fill-in on preparations for this meeting? Now, this is the chap I was telling you about. We're very happy to have you with us tonight. Have you looked around? Good. Now, this is the way it goes. The first step, of course, is picking the meeting place. When it's a big meeting, as tonight, we use this school or a church auditorium. And when it's small, we use one of the homes. We sent out the mimeographed announcements pretty early, and then some of my people made a few reminder phone calls, too. We also reminded the trainers and leaders of the equipment to be used and the exact part they'll play at the meeting. And we arranged for someone to take minutes, and also made sure that one of the newspaper men who lives in our neighborhood notified the local paper before the meeting. He'll send in a report after it tonight. Tell him about the auditorium, George. Everything seems so set here. A few of us got here pretty early tonight, surveyed the lights and heat, saw that the tables and chairs were properly placed. We also took a look at the ventilation. Then, of course, we checked over the exhibits and the literature and the props. That's the projector and blackboard and film strips and things. Yes, and also the attendance roster, registration cards, the reading light at the speaker's desk, and even extra pads and pencils. Nothing left. We don't deal in chances, Ed, as you know. Everything is scheduled, part of a plan, a time plan. Say, which reminds me, I've got to go on with my work. Take over, will you, Ed, and tell him how we're going to run the show tonight. I've been briefed, and I know that this meeting tonight has a definite timetable. 20 to 30 minutes will be allowed for people to register and look at the displays. They'll allow 10 minutes to open the meeting, to state the problem, get them oriented to the reason for the meeting. If possible, It'll be something big and really thought-provoking. The idea is to arouse interest quickly. You have to get them interested before they'll really listen. Then, they'll put in 75 to 90 minutes on the main subject, a lecture, or demonstration, or film. With perhaps 2 breaks to stretch, kick around a few ideas with their neighbors, or discuss the motion picture or film strip. Then, a further 15 minutes to summarize and close up. After the crowd goes home, George will put in another 10 minutes or so with the training staff, discussing the manner in which the meeting went and noting anything that might add to the success of any subsequent meetings. Now, if you'll come with me, I'd like to show you a couple of things that play a really important role in the main part of the meeting. There's a proverb about a picture being worth 1,000 words. We buy that idea in civil defense. See that blackboard up there? It's a good way to convey an idea in visual terms quickly and with no special preparation. Diagrams are good too. This easel has a series of carefully prepared diagrams that George is going to use tonight. And then, of course, motion pictures or film strips. They're unnatural, if you're well prepared. There are those who think that movies and film strips simply require showing. Well, it's not quite that simple. You have to give definite assignments to various people. To read the narration, handle projection, control the lights. It's advisable to rehearse once or twice so it'll run smoothly. And very important, prepare a summary to use after the screening. But before you show the film, the audience should understand what problem in civil defense you are studying. George has a film strip here tonight, which will help on one of these civil defense problems. I imagine George will discuss the problem with the class before showing the film. Something like this. We're all interested in developing skills to save lives, our own and the members of our family, as well as our neighbors. Now, how many of you have taken first aid? That's fine. I know that you'll be interested in the film strip we're showing tonight called Emergency Action to Save Lives. It has an important message for the individual householder as well as the members of local civil defense groups. If you have any questions, try to keep them in mind as you see the film strip or jot them down. We'll have a break in the middle and at the end for questions and discussion. Just remember this, please. A picture is not intended to tell the whole story. When you leave this evening, pick up the manual on the subject at the literature rack near the door. Look it over at your first opportunity. It's got an important message for you. George will probably say something like that. But his real task is going to be in handling the audience, the questions and discussion, and all the special problems that always come up at meetings. And that's something you'll have to be prepared for. For instance, suppose the discussion gets one-sided, it ought to be kept on track. Well, throw in another interesting viewpoint, or quote from the Civil Defense Handbook. And if they're not giving out, you're not getting the reaction you want. Try something like, where'd you get this information? Or, won't you give an example of what you mean? In other words, get them to give you the who, what, where, when, how, and why. Another little sticker is the mixed-up argument or an obviously questionable source of information. Make this one friendly but firm. Something like, what reason do we have for accepting this argument? Who gathered the facts in this case? One thing you want to do is to be sure your audience understands the degree of disagreement. You could ask if you were correct in assuming that despite some mild differences in viewpoint, you're all pretty much agreed on the point under discussion. And then there's the flighty type that you really have to nail down. He wanders off into vague generalizations, and the only thing you can do is tell him that his ideas are interesting, but would he, please, be a bit more specific and give us an example? But if you think that one's a problem, you can anticipate more serious ones. There is a type of individual who many times has good ideas, but who takes up more than his share of the meeting time. Say, George, tell my friend here how you handle this type of person. Well, sure. When he or she hesitates in a speech, I politely state, "You've raised a number of thought-provoking points that will keep us busy for a while. Would anyone else like to comment on this?" If that doesn't hold her, then I say, "While we're on the point, let's hear from the others." It's true that that will work with civil defense, but it never works with my... Do you suppose my wife will ever see this film strip? Well, George, the one other type that we haven't dealt with, or rather the two that get into an argument and hold up the meeting. I'd say, I think we all know how you two feel on this point. Who else would like to get in on it? Oh, say, I've got to run. See you later. Thanks, George. Those are the situations you're likely to run into most often. Now, one other thing I'd like to explain. The summary. In summing up, see that they go home with a positive feeling, something concrete to think about. Then you should announce the exact time and place and subject for the next meeting or of similar meetings. Also, you'll want to appoint committees for studies and special reports. That really winds it up, and the audience can leave. But you've got one more step. That step is to meet briefly with your training staff to decide what's to be done before the next meeting and who's going to do it. In other words, you've got to rough out a tentative agenda for the future. A lot of preparation, and never forget the importance of scheduling. But the best way to learn how to run an effective neighborhood block warden meeting is to attend one the way you will tonight. See it in action. Then figure out the additional things you want to know. It ties into what our friend George says to his training staff after a meeting. It's something that every block warden who wants to organize an efficient neighborhood block warden meeting should ask right now. Well, ladies and gentlemen, are there any questions?